You're listening to Two Girls, One Crossword.
I have only one sweet thing in the house, and I use that sparingly. It is trail mix, and I really feel like they're purposely not putting in a lot of M&Ms. You know what I mean?
Wait, okay.
Like M&Ms, peanut, and raisin. That's like the trifecta. Well, you get a handful out, and you have probably like 15 peanuts and 3 M&Ms.
Okay. I'm sorry. The fact that you're telling me that one of your sweet treats in your apartment is trail mix?
That's not, you're reading it wrong. That's the only thing I have in my house right now that is somewhat sweet, and I'm disappointed in it.
I see. Okay. My judgment has ended. I was about to give you like a very big bollocking.
Do you know me?
I feel like I should know you at this point. We're almost however many episodes into this goddamn podcast. Okay, so I don't like trail mix because I feel like it's too sweet with the raisins and the M&Ms. Because like, I understand why you need to eat trail mix. Bring it on your hike with you. It's really good for that stuff. Okay, but outside of that, if you're eating trail mix for like fun, I'm just like, why wouldn't you just eat everything separately? First of all, I would never eat the raisins. Second of all, M&Ms on their own, killer. They just slay the snack, right? And then peanuts or cashews or any nut is a very good snack on its own. Why do we gotta mix the bag?
There's something to the flavor combination, but I agree. Maybe I just really want peanut M&Ms or pretzel M&Ms, and I'm trying to replace it with trail mix, but I know it's not the same. My taste buds know it's not the same.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Are you wearing a 4th of July themed shirt?
No, I was actually hoping that, listen, anyone watching us on YouTube, yes, my shirt is, I don't even know it. It's a bird, and it's an abstract bird, and it has an American flag on it. I got this shirt so many years ago, and I wear it as like a workout shirt or like around the house shirt.
You were hoping I wouldn't notice.
I was actually thinking if I should say something about it. I don't want people to think that I'm like patriotic in this way, but it is what it is. I don't want to get rid of it because it is good quality.
Sure.
Like it's lasted for all these years. So, reduce, reuse, recycle. But it is a little embarrassing when I wear it out in public. But I wear much more embarrassing things out in public, so that's the least of my worries.
Anyway, I am not wearing an American flag t-shirt, abstract art or otherwise today. I am wearing my typical black t-shirt because I have literally almost every piece of, like every shirt that I have is dark colored. I'm trying to change it.
I know, you're like rebuilding a whole wardrobe right now. Yeah, and we have nowhere to wear to, but I'm excited once it's time for us to step out.
Now's the time,
Look out, world.
Now's the time.
I know. I don't know. I know. I need to be buying some more things to redo my look. I've been wearing the same like ratty loungewear for a year now, and I don't know how to wear real clothes anymore, but I'm doing a closet clean out this weekend. Ooh. Thanks for asking. I guess we should probably get into, now that everyone knows our business.
Now that everybody knows our business, do they know our names? My name is Chelsea Rowan, and you're listening to Two Girls, One Crossword, your favorite weekly Podword crosscast.
Beautiful. And I'm Grace Topinka. In case you've never heard of me before, now you know.
And you know she loves her American flag t-shirts.
That is a lie. Well, shall we jump right into our Polapalooza? Because it is kind of patriotic-ish.
Oh, okay. Yes. Did I look at the poll this week? Maybe not. Hit me with the poll.
It was a more simple poll. I just wanted to get the gauge of our listeners. I asked, what's your vibe? And this is on Twitter. And I just gave Summer Olympics or Winter Olympics as the option. And it was extremely close. Winter Olympics won by 1 vote only. So, very close. I voted for summer because I really love watching gymnastics. But I do love a lot of the winter stuff, too.
I would say winter all the way. You get ice hockey. You get ice skating, snowboarding.
I like snowboarding.
The luge sports.
Skateboarding is in the summer, so.
It's true, but it's brand new.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it live yet.
And rock climbing is also in the summer. And gymnastics. I feel like gymnastics is one of the most fun.
It is. It's amazing. I love swimming too. It's a good one. But you know what I really love?
What?
And I'm not ashamed. I love curling.
I feel like curling is good for the lay people of the world because I think, well,
Are you
I don't
calling
know.
me a
I don't
lay
wanna-
person?
No, I don't want to talk out of turn, but I feel like if you were just a regular person and you wanted to be in the Olympics, that is the sport you could like pick up at whatever age and like dedicate a bunch of time to and get good at. But maybe it's a lot harder than it looks.
There's plausibility, I think. Okay, it's more likely that you and I became curling Olympians than, say, gymnastics, right? Because we're both too old for gymnastics. I just could never get my body that size ever again. But yeah, so I think you're right. I think plausibly curling is the one sport that we all have more luck trying to get into the Olympics for. I mean, I feel like, and this is nothing against the people who do curling, but I feel like they're all middle-aged dads, which is great. It does
kind of seem that way. But I also feel like it's probably a lot harder than it looks, and we would be really bad at it if we tried. But
the first step is to get on the ice, Grace. You and I, the last time you went ice skating was like a moment. But it was a moment.
But I feel like curling, you're wearing shoes. You know, you're not ice skating.
But you're on ice.
Yeah.
In shoes. I'm sure you're wearing special shoes. I don't know anything about curling, but still.
Do any of our listeners curl? Please let us know.
Please. We'll come watch one of your curling matches. Games.
A curling
See you
game.
there. Well, I love it. Should we get into our hits and our shits?
I guess we can just trudge right along.
We should. I want to start us off with a gentle, albeit firm.
Okay. I'm not understanding what that means.
Reminder to all of our listeners that we are fast approaching on how many episodes, Grace? How many?
What are we? 98? We're almost at 100.
We're almost at 100 episodes. And boy, oh boy, do we have something fun in store for you for 100. At least that's the goal, right? We're trying to plan something fun. We've got high hopes. We hope that you stick around to figure out what it is. I guess we could just tell them. We told you last week. If you listened last week, then you know. But we're hoping to get everybody jam-packed, excited, and just ready to rip-roaring to go. Grace, what are we doing for our 100th episode?
Right now, we are cultivating trivia questions from each of our past 100 episodes. So that's basically 2 questions an episode. Of course, sometimes we did the same topic, whatever. We will be making a little trivia game, basically, that Chelsea and I will play, and we are going to quiz each other, potentially work together, is probably what will happen, and see how much of this information we've retained over the year. So yeah, it should be fun to see what we still know, and it's a good way for, you know, everyone to get a little brush up of everything we've gone over.
For real, I'm very excited to see how our listeners fare as well. It could be fun to have them, you know, let us know if they did well on the quiz. It's kind of like, you know, when you watch Jeopardy with your family and you're like, I wish I knew this answer, and you kind of just scream it out at the TV when you do. That's what episode 100 is going to be like.
And we may be recording together again. Right? I believe we discussed this.
In the flesh, together.
But this may be fun. You know, if you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, this might be one of the best ones to watch on YouTube.
It would be the first YouTube that we record together in the flesh.
That's true.
And I'm telling you, our dynamic is just that much better when we're skin to skin.
Sparks fly, baby. Well, yeah, looking forward to it.
Me too. Speaking of sparks, I want to kickstart our hits and shits section with the Sunday, July 4th, the Independence Day 4th, Washington Post, Evan Bernhol's puzzle. Did you do this puzzle?
I did do that puzzle. Let me see. I think I have some.
Okay. Yes. I want to talk about the theme, first of all, because initially, on the surface, the theme is pretty, you know, standard. But I kid you not, this theme is actually beyond words, just bonkers. Like, I haven't been doing Evan's puzzles long, but he's like outdone himself with this one. So,
okay, yes,
bravo.
I knew that there was something more to this theme that I wasn't picking up, and I meant to look into it. So I'm glad that you're going over it.
Yes, it's amazing. I would highly recommend anybody to do it. And if you're not doing Evan Bernholz's puzzles on the Washington Post, they're available for free every Sunday online. They have partner modes. You can send it to a friend and do it digitally with a friend. It's so much fun. Definitely try his puzzles. Okay. But first of all, the theme is called It's a Start. The puzzle's called It's a Start. And essentially, the base theme is there's a phrase and then there's something in parentheses. For example, 27 across. Strongly assertive one, parentheses, Greek letters. So because the puzzle's called It's a Start, the parentheses is looking for the first of the Greek letters. So that would be alpha. Strongly assertive one would be alpha female. So the answer was alpha female. Another example, 36 across. Honda Accord's competitors once, and then parentheses, planets from the sun. The first planet from the sun is Mercury. So the answer was Mercury Sable. Another one, 92 across. No need for us to talk longer. Parentheses, Roman numerals. And the first Roman numeral is I for 1. So the answer was I won't keep you. Amazing. And then you get to 125 across. Highly important feature of 7 answers and every clue in this puzzle. And the answer was first letters. So the first letter of the feature answers is highly important. And the first letters of every answer, so alpha female, Mercury Sable, ensign wasps, red sanders, I won't keep you. The first letters spell out America. Okay?
Oh, duh.
Right.
Okay.
And so then the second part of that clue, 125 across, highly important feature of 7 answers and every clue in this puzzle. So the first letter of every clue is important here as well. But why? Why, you may wonder. I'll tell you. Then we get to 141 across. You'll find an excerpt from this document in the puzzle. And the answer was Declaration of Independence. And first of all, the grid was massive. This grid was 25 squares across. Declaration of Independence all the way across 25 squares. Amazing. So I'm like, what do you mean? I will find an excerpt of the Declaration of Independence in this puzzle. So I'm like looking at the grid. I'm like, what's going on here? I can't understand it. And then I remembered 125 across. Highly important feature of 7 answers and every clue in this puzzle. Every single clue, the first letter of every single clue of the puzzle spelled out a phrase from the Declaration of Independence. And this was the phrase. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and blah, 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 onward and onward. So if you look at the puzzle, the first letter of the clue, of every clue, W, E, downward, it spells out the first phrase of the Declaration of Independence.
That's wild. I think it's because I was doing it on my iPad. I didn't see all the clues next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
But
it took me going back again.
So
I was like,
cool.
I'm just like, how do you even begin to construct something like that?
He's been working on it all year.
However you do it, Evan, you're amazing.
Do you think Evan creates each new... do you think it's like for this, he knew he wanted to do an American themed one, so he's been working on it for a while?
I think probably. There's probably like these like cornerstone puzzles, you know, like all the major holidays he sets aside and he might, you know, in January start constructing.
Arbor Day.
Exactly. Flag Day, National Donut Day, all of these very important days. Yeah, so he probably has like these cornerstone puzzles lined up, kind of like how you have like somebody's obit lined up.
Yeah. Dark.
Very. Anyway, great puzzle.
I just want to give a shout out though to a clue that I really liked in there, probably because my cat's name is Arnold, but 4 down was, hey Arnold may be shouted in this playground game. It was TV tag, which I forgot was a thing.
Right.
Until I came up in this puzzle.
I feel, what did we call it? I don't think we called it TV tag, but I know what the game is.
Mm-hmm. I enjoyed that. That was fun. Thanks, Evan. I want to give a shout out to the Monday New York Times puzzle by Peter Gordon. 12 down, only Spanish city to host the Olympics. If you listened to our last episode about Olympic host cities, you would know that it was Barcelona. Not only are they only the only Spanish city to host the Olympics, but they're one of the only cities that actually increased their tourism thanks to the Olympics. So
thanks, Olympics.
Every other host city wants to do it, and a lot of them have never been able to pull it off. So shout out to Barcelona. That's also where I studied abroad. If anyone even cares.
I'm sure they all care in some way or another.
I also enjoyed seeing 45 Across, actress Lohan of Mean Girls, Lindsay Lohan. It's just fun to see her in the New York Times.
Yes. And
17 Across, marine inhabitant that's an animal, not a plant, despite what it's called. Sea cucumber. Which just reminds me of SpongeBob.
Yes. Speaking of doing things in person, Grace and I got to do a puzzle together in person for the first time in almost 16 months.
Mm-hmm.
We did the Saturday, July 3rd puzzle, New York Times by Cameron Austin Collins, which I think was a great puzzle to do with you, especially given the circumstances. We had a lot of fun doing this puzzle together. So I just wanted to highlight that. It was really nice to get back into that groove and just, shoot the shit with Grace next to a puzzle. We did it online. We didn't actually print it out, but we could have. But one of the clues that I liked from that, we both really liked this one, 31 Across, the fly, the host, or the thing. And the answer was creature feature. Very cool.
Yes.
And then this one, I think, it's not a shit, but this is the one that Grace and I looked at each other and we were like, this is just so weirdly clued. 12 down, milk provider. And the answer was wet nurse. And it just feels like the wet nurse is like a sack of a human that just carries milk, like that's their only job. Wet nurses do much more than carry milk or provide milk. I mean, I know that they do provide milk, some of them anyway, but it just...
Yes, that's why they're called wet. Yeah, I agree that it was weird.
We laughed a lot about that one. It caught us off guard.
Sometimes they get you. Okay, I want to talk about... Wait, sorry, are you done?
I'm done with that one, yeah.
I want to talk about the Tuesday New York Times by Katie Hale. The theme of it, I swear we've seen this theme before, and I tried to Google it, but it's kind of hard because it's about ABBA, and there's so many ABBA themes that But the revealer was 69 Across, pop group with the hits 1739 and 61 Across, and it's ABBA. And then 1739 and 61 are all like completely across 15, and it's the songs Money, 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 Gimme, 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 I Do, I Do, I Do, I Do. They're all 15.
Oh,
but I feel like we've had that before.
We might have, but like you said, there's so many of these themes that it's kind of hard to keep track. And I guess this is one of those instances where you and I could probably get that subscription service and like actually be able to look this information up. Maybe one day we'll commit.
One day. I also, 26 down was witches, and the answer was hags. And not saying that, it's not necessarily shit because that is, hags are supposed to be old witches, but I also feel like hags is very derogative towards women because there's no male counterpart. So I want to offer a possible suggestion, although Will Shortz would never accept it because no one's probably ever signed his yearbook. But, back in the day when you would sign people's yearbooks, you would say hags, have a great summer. Just throwing that out there.
Let's come to the 21st century, okay? Hags all around. No, I agree. Yes, it's not false that hags and witches could be synonymous, but witches is one of those like reclaimed phrases, I think, and it's also like a legitimate religion. We've talked about Wicca before on this podcast.
Legitimate-ish.
Right. And like hags, and by legitimate, I mean like real.
And I mean that is that it takes a lot of, it kind of appropriates a lot of other like ancient spiritual practices and stuff.
Right. Which doesn't every religion, but let's not get into that right now.
I don't have a range for that, honestly.
But yeah, agree. There's no male counterpart for hags, so let's stop equating witches, which is, the connotation is feminine, to hags, which is also, the connotation is feminine, okay? So let's stop that.
Unless I'll have a great summer instead.
Let's do it. What else did I like? I liked the Monday, July 5th New Yorker by Patrick Berry, 13 Across. This is probably my favorite answer and clue of the week. Probably because I'm basically an 85-year-old man. 13 across, original candy company, ? And I immediately knew that the answer was Werther's. I knew they were trying to trick me, but I knew it was Werther's because oh my God, my grandfather always had Werther's in his pocket. And
Same.
That stuff was like cocaine to me. I would just suck on a Werther's all goddamn day. I also
You can still do that. You can buy Werther's for yourself.
I could. I do have like a really cute candy jar. I could put Werther's in the candy jar, but it would be dangerous because it's one of those things like I would not be able to stop myself.
Those and the little strawberry ones. You know, like the wrapper strawberry and it's like kind of chewy on the inside.
It's like old people candy, but I say that in a good way.
Yes, that's a compliment.
It is. Another clue from that puzzle that I liked, vehicles that go downhill. This is 16 down. I just liked that. It was a really long answer. Soapbox racers. It's like a nice thing. I've never seen that in a crossword before. And then 31 across, opportunities to go learn something was class trips. And it really is. I love class trips. If I was still in school, I would love to go on a class trip.
Shout out to King Tut.
Yes.
Chelsea and I both went on a class trip there before we even knew that the other existed.
Fate.
Well,
you got anything else?
New Yorker. I liked the July 7th New Yorker by Amy Lucido. 50 across, game that rewards inexperienced players. Is Never Have I Ever.
Loved that one. Amy never disappoints. I've never been disappointed by an Amy puzzle.
And I also did the Robin Weintraub puzzle on July 2nd. And I learned something, 43 down, the Dutch tulip craze of the 1630s and the Beatles craze of the 1960s. I didn't know there was like a tulip mania.
Right. It's so funny that you say that because I was going to say I learned something from that puzzle as well.
Was it
42 down, Christmas display, and the answer was crochet or creche. And I was like, what the goddamn hell is this puzzle on? So, of course, I Google crochet or creche. It's spelled Creche. And it's literally just like the nativity scene that you would put out at Christmas time. The one that, most Christians have in their house somewhere. Just like that, like, little hut with, like, all the figurines. That's what that's called. I was like, I just call it a nativity scene.
It's a manger.
Sorry.
Actually, I don't know.
Who knows? But I learned a word. So thank you, Robin, for teaching both Grace and I something this week.
Yeah, I saw that. And then I was like, I don't know what that is. But then I didn't look into it further. So
this is who we are.
That's that.
I want to end on one last good clue from this week. This is from the Friday, July 2nd, New York Times by Brooke Cusick and Adam Nicole, 41 across. In-N-Out Burgers, animal-style burgers and fries, for example. And I believe this was all the way across. Maybe it was like one short of 15, but the answer was secret menu items. Amazing. Have you ever ordered anything from In-N-Out animal style? I have.
No, I have never.
It's a secret menu item, okay? Get to it.
I feel bad ordering stuff up. Well, first of all, normally I like stuff on the regular menu, but like I know they have a secret menu Starbucks, but I don't know. I feel like kind of an a-hole ordering that.
Right.
I guess it's always really complicated.
Right.
know?
If you work at one of these stores, is ordering off the secret menu annoying, or is it something that like you're trained to be prepared to do?
Yeah.
Is it actually secret, or is it just like a marketing ploy? Because to me, it's just a marketing ploy.
I mean, you could be really picky at any place and order whatever you wanted. Make up your own secret menu.
It's true.
Not saying that.
And you can literally go to Starbucks and like make up a drink and be like, I want a double shot frappa mocha rainbow swirl with vanilla and caramel on ice.
That probably is a real drink there.
Right. And they're like, okay, thank you.
It's like, oh, another one today?
Yeah.
I want to talk about my last one is the Wednesday New York Times, Peter A. Collins.
Okay.
This is the right one. Yes. There's a couple that I liked, but 47 across, Quiet You Quaintly was Oh Dry Up. I have never heard that before. Undecided if I ever want to use that.
Right. It's kind of like Eat Crow shows up a lot in crosswords, especially in the New York Times. And I'm like, I think that is going to die with a certain age group. And like, that's not a problem. And I'm not trying to shit on anybody for being in a certain age group. But I feel like you and I come to the puzzle with like this, we see certain phrases come up and we're like, Literally, I've never heard that in my entire life. I've been around for 30 years and I haven't heard that once.
Maybe we're just hanging out with people with very limited phrase vocabulary.
True. That's very true. Don't hate on us because we are, in fact, living in a very unique bubble.
3 down. Don't knock until you've tried it.
Oh, doorbell,
Doorbell.
right?
Yeah.
So good.
And then, sorry, the USA Today from today, July 8th by Wendy L. Brands. Shout out to you, 44 across, origami birds, it's cranes. And then 8 down, it was blank caps movie candy, and it was snow caps. And I just made me think, like, yeah, snow caps are just at the movies.
Right.
What?
Or you go to like a vintage candy
to
store and it has them there. But like, that's it.
But plugging the USA Today because they tend to be a little easier and you can just download the app and it's free. And if you have never gotten into puzzles, it's a good way to get into them, learn all the little tricks and stuff. I always enjoy doing them.
That's how I got into crosswords. Definitely download the USA Today app. It's amazing. And I think we need to make a pack to represent them more on the podcast.
Yeah, I do usually do them. But you're right.
I need to do them more. I find that the app is better to solve for the USA Today, but I tend to do crosswords on my laptop because it's easier for me to take notes and prepare for the podcast. And I don't like solving on their online interface, and I need to just get over myself.
That's a personal problem, but I have faith in you.
Thank you. Do you have faith in my ability to flip a coin? Is that time?
Yes, I do. I believe in you.
All right. I'm going to flip a coin. We're going to see who's going to go first today. I'm flipping the coin now. Tails.
That's me, right?
That's Grace.
That's me. Okay. My clue is from the Tuesday, July 6th, New York Times by Katie Hale. And it is 11 down, staples of British Christmas time theatre. And the answer is pantomimes. Now, I'm not going to be talking about British Christmas time theatre. Sorry to anyone who wanted me to talk about that. But I'm talking about mimes, pantomimes.
I was wondering when we would get to mimes and pantomimes, to be honest with you.
It comes up a lot.
It comes up a lot, and it feels very explicitly a Grace topic.
Well, here we are, and we're going to get into it. But first, I want to talk about the difference between mimes and pantomimes.
Okay.
So the word mime covers many different forms of wordless art, the same way dance can refer to like ballet dancing or tap dancing or like tribal celebrations. So it's kind of an umbrella term. However, the French school uses mime and pantomime synonymously, so it caused like some confusion among what's the difference. But according to American Mime Theater, pantomime is the art of creating the illusion of reality by dealing with imaginary objects or situations. It relies on the ability to imply weight, texture, rhythm, force to, the blank air around them. Okay. It can be comedic or dramatic, and it's more about conveying recognizable actions like walking the dog or opening an umbrella, and it can involve one person or an ensemble.
Okay.
Mime, on the other hand, is the art of acting silently through various kinds of theatrical movement. It's usually only one artist. They use imaginary objects, but also use their body as an object, and the main goal is an expression of an idea. So I'm mostly going to be talking about the art of mimes.
Okay.
Really interestingly, I'm not going to get too much into this, but miming has actually been used in research studies to kind of look at how the brain visualizes things. We talked about this a little bit in the ventriloquist episode, how your mind will like see that ventriloquist doll is talking and it thinks it's real basically. But with miming, they found that your mind can't help but see the object that's being mimed. Like even if I can't get into like how they did the research, but it's really cool. Like even if you're told like don't pay attention to what the mime is doing, your brain like automatically looks at it and thinks that like that's an object. If it's done well, of course. And like miming is I feel like it's kind of like a joke and funny, but it takes a really long time to actually master the art of miming and become a really good mime. Years.
I trust you. I really do trust you.
And then today I'm only going to talk about Western mimes, but mimes and pantomimes have existed in Eastern cultures just as long, if not longer, but I just don't have time to cover
For sure.
everything. So
Gotcha. I gotcha.
when you think of a mime, what do you picture?
Red ascot, black and white striped shirt, red beret, black tights, white face.
So yeah, that is a traditional French mime, but it also has kind of become a symbol of like French culture too. Like if you were to describe a stereotypical French man, you'd say like beret, black and white striped shirt, like neck scarf, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But where did miming actually begin?
Tell me.
It has origins similar to any type of like drama or dance. When there was loss of words, performance turned to gestures. Mimicries have been performed by Aboriginal tribes in Australia as far back as 60,000 years ago in ceremonies known as corroborees. The event showcases dramatic representations of the history of the tribe through mimed actions of hunting animals, catching fish, and they also imitated the movements made by birds and animals themselves. But the traditional French miming that we know today started in ancient Greece. Of course, that's where everything seems to start.
Yes.
Specifically at the Theater of Dionysus in Athens. So masked dancers would perform in front of a 10,000 person audience to honor the god of theatre Dionysus. So in a way, pantomime actually started as like a religious performance.
Okay.
Mime performances typically depicted everyday occurrences that would appeal to a broad audience. And then when the Romans invaded Greece, they took miming back to Italy with them, and they added the more like comedic and dramatic aspects of mime that we know today. You know, there's always like kind of the sad mime, super emotive and stuff like that. The name mime is taken from the name of a Roman performer called Pantomimus. Pantomimus is defined as a non-speaking dancer in the Roman theatre who performed dramatic scenes, acting all the characters in a story in succession using only masks, body movement, and rhythmic gestures.
Okay.
In the 1500s, it got absorbed into the extremely popular, I don't speak Italian, commedia dell'arte genre that flourished in Europe until the late 18th century. So
I was actually going to ask you if like this was related to, especially the clown character in the, go ahead.
Yeah, it is where it started. So commedia dell'arte, formerly called Italian comedy in English, was characterized by masked types of characters. So basically these characters, they were fixed and they appeared in many different plays. They were often exaggerated versions of, you know, real life people. And they kind of just like would reuse these types of characters over and over again. So there was like foolish old man, there was a devious servant, a military officer who was like, you know, very pompous. Commedia dell'arte was also based heavily on improvisation. So most of the characters were set, but the plots and the dialogue changed with every single performance. And actors wore costumes that would signify their character. Adelcino, aka Harlequin, was the most mimey type of character. He had like the white face and the black hat. And that character especially relied on a lot of pantomiming. That was a big part of that character. And all of these different like types, they're called zanni. But these performances often took place in town squares and marketplaces, making them easily accessible to working class people. Commedia dell'arte troupes traveled from city to city, putting on shows, and the performances relied on dramatic gestures to convey the story. This allowed performers to reach a wider audience and avoided any language barriers, which helped increase its popularity throughout Europe. In Rome, the completely silent mime climbed to immense popularity. The legendary Livius Andronicus lost his voice, so he had the chorister speak the lines while he mimed to the piping of the flute and the rhythmic clash of the cymbals. So that was kind of the first person who like didn't use any sound at all, and that was because he had lost his voice. Oh. The introduction into French culture came in 1576 when a company of Italians led by Flaminia Scala visited France with the art form, and he kind of introduced it to France. But at this time, mime acts were becoming more and more vulgar to appeal, you know, to like the masses, the lowest denominator. Of course. And you know that someone had a problem with that. The Christian Church, of course. They spoke out about miming and its so-called depravity. Of course. But miming cannot be kept down, okay?
You cannot keep this guy down.
In 1816, almost 2 centuries later, the French mime emerged thanks to French performer Jean-Gaspard Debarau. Again, I'm so sorry, I do not speak French. Along with a theatrical troupe that was largely made up of his own children, Debarau was hired by the Paris Théâtre des Funambules, I'm sorry, to perform comedy and acrobatic acts, but he had other ideas in mind. He painted his face with white paint, and he put on a droopy button suit and took to the stage as Pierrot, a lovable and lovesick character made famous in Italian theater.
Yes, Poirot. I mean, if you're familiar with like the pantomime clown character, if like an image comes to mind, that's probably who you're thinking of, Poirot. Yeah.
So his endearing persona and exaggerated facial features delighted audiences without him having to speak a single line. And he basically created the modern day mime act.
Love it.
Debarau is often credited as the father of mime, but many performers followed suit. When he passed away, Paul Legrand succeeded him as the new Perrault, giving the character a more tearful, sentimental dimension that we still see in a lot of mime acts today, that like sad clown type of vibe. And although he kept the white face paint, he like did away with the bulky, like saggy suit, and often chose to perform in like his ordinary clothes, which often happened to be a beret and a striped shirt. So that's kind of how
Breton of him. Yes, I
in the 20
yeah.
Sorry,
I went through a period of time where like I was obsessed with France, like as you know most early cinema students do. And I kid you not, almost every shirt that I owned, shirt plus sweater, was like that Breton like striped white and black or white and blue just pattern. And I actually kind of miss those days because it was such a look and it feels very French. Anyway.
I was going to say, I kind of feel like I dress like a mime a lot. We both do. I wear black and white striped tops and a black beanie. Like not a, don't give me a beret and then it's over. But
we just need ascots now.
Yeah. Good costume, by the way. Last minute costume if anyone needs an idea. Okay, but in the 20th century, people started studying mime more deeply. They were even publishing like detailed theoretical explorations of the art form. It was starting to be seen as like a serious art form. Miming was also heavily used in silent movies at the time, so actors like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton didn't wear white face paint, but they still like told stories through body language and gestures alone.
I wonder if this is how connected it is to like vaudeville, because like Buster Keaton got started in vaudeville, you know, like that. It's a very physical, like theater style, you know.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious. That's something I might look into later.
Connected.
Okay.
But their performances in silent films inspired the most famous mime of all time, Marcel Marceau, aka Bip the Clown. And I'm going to talk about his story because it's more interesting than him just being one of the most famous mimes alone.
Tell me.
So this is from an article on history.com called The French Resistance Secret Weapon, The Mime Marcel Marceau by Aaron Blackamore. Okay, so Marcel found international success as Bip the Clown after World War II, but before that, he helped save 70 Jewish children from the Nazis by helping them cross the Swiss border. So Marcel, who was Jewish himself, was training to be a mime in France when his cousin, George Loinger, horrible American pronunciation of that, recruited him into the French resistance. And Marcel was only a teenager at the time. He was like around 16-ish. So his cousin George was a commander in the secret unit who was part of a Jewish relief group that smuggled Jewish children from occupied France to neutral countries. Their mission was to evacuate Jewish children who had been hiding in a French orphanage and get them to the Swiss border where they would sneak to safety. But of course, traveling with large groups of children is very difficult, and that's where Marcel comes in. So his cousin George said in an interview, quote, "The kids loved Marcel and felt safe with him. He had already begun doing performances in the orphanage. The kids had to appear like they were simply going on vacation to a home near the Swiss border, and Marcel really put them at ease." Felipe Mora, the son of one of Marcel's resistance comrades, said, quote, "He mimed to keep children quiet as they were escaping. It had nothing to do with show business. He was miming for his life." Wow. And then just his ability to, improvise and his mimicry ability helped him a bunch of times too. One time he pretended to be a Boy Scout leader, and he said the kids were, he was leading a troop of scouts. Another time when he was a little older, he unexpectedly ran into a group of German soldiers near the end of the war, and he used his mimicry skills to pretend to be a member of the French army, and he demanded that the German soldiers surrender to him, and they did. 30 of them surrendered to him.
Dude.
There is actually a movie based on this called Resistance, I think, with Jesse Eisenberg.
Okay.
And then by 1944, the American troops noticed his skills, and he had his first big performance in an army tent in front of 3,000 American soldiers following the liberation of Paris.
Wow.
After the war, he began studying mime at the Sarah Bernhardt Theater in Paris, and in 1947, he created his iconic character, Bip, and you would recognize Bip by his red flower attached to his wrinkled top hat.
Oh, yes.
That's Bip the Clown. He changed his last name from Mangel to Marceau, and while he explicitly stated that Bip was not intended to be a specifically Jewish character, he has alluded to his character's dark origins, saying, quote, "The people who came back from the concentration camps were never able to talk about it. My name is Mangel. I am Jewish. Perhaps that unconsciously contributed towards my choice of silence." And I mentioned before how certain mime characters were taken over once the original performer died, like Perrault. But when Marcel died in 2007, nobody stepped forward to take his place. And it can be said that there hasn't been a mime as universally known and celebrated as Bip since then. I'm going to end with a quote from novelist Maeve Fellows, who wrote about his death and legacy for the Paris Review. Quote, "All we have is the footage, fuzzy flickering recordings of his performances. A solitary figure on the stage in a circle of spotlight. We can see the white face below the battered hat and watch it move, flickering from one emotion to the next, as if someone is pressing the controls on a mask. The outfit is oddly creepy. The act seems to take itself so seriously as to be ridiculous. But when the figure climbs the staircase, we feel that he is rising upwards. When he lifts the dumbbell, we can sense its weight." The end.
Now I gotta go look up his performances.
Yeah. We'll definitely post pictures of
For sure.
him on our Instagram.
Yes.
But yeah.
Definitely. And make sure you
That's
follow
mine
us on
for you.
Instagram. I love that. It's interesting how everything always originates in like ancient Greece, doesn't it? And then
Gets stolen by a bunch of people and then just moves around. Yeah.
Exactly. I love that. Very nice. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you.
Moving right along, my topic comes from the Sunday, July 4th WAPO by Evan Bernholz from 54 Across, Enthroned Figure at Versailles. And the answer is Roy, R-O-I, which stands for, the Sun King. It essentially means the king in France. And I'm not talking about the king. I'm talking about Versailles, the palace. And so that basically means we've got two sort of French-ish topics today.
Yes, we do.
We do indeed. So I'm going to start us off with a quote about Versailles. "How to find words for Versailles. How to capture a charm that is often dazzling, sometimes shabby, or instant or nostalgic, but that the vicissitudes of history have never managed to destroy, ever since a king resolved to make it a symbol of his power for all the world to see." And that comes from a book called Versailles from Louis XIV to Jeff Koons by Catherine Pigard and Mathieu de Venau. I looked up this book to see, could I buy this? I cannot buy this book because it is $895. Apparently it's like a massive, beautifully curated art book. It's like one of those books that comes with a stand and you put it out on display. You know what I mean?
$800.
$895. So
You better read to me. Am I right?
So what it better give me a fucking back massage to just read into me. So have you ever been to Versailles?
No.
Have you been to France?
Yes.
I have as well. I've been to Paris, but I never got to visit Versailles. I really, really wish that I had visited Versailles when I was in Paris. But I was doing my European trip. I was studying abroad and I got to do my 15-day fall trip. And Paris was the last stop. And by the time I got to Paris, I had I think I had 15 euro in cash on me. And that was enough to pay for the like the bus to the airport after the 3 days that I was going to spend there. I needed to like, my roommate paid for all of my food. Like that's like how broke I was by the time I got to Paris. So no, I didn't have money to pay for the train ride to Versailles and then, you know, the admission, sadly.
Well, Versailles will always be there. I've never been there, but there is a Versailles in Miami.
Oh.
And a lot of people like get their quince pictures taken there.
Well, let's go.
Yeah.
Screw Paris or France.
I feel like there's like a fly flying into my mouth. Anyways, you were saying?
I'm saying screw Paris. Let's go to Miami. I'll meet you there.
Okay.
But until then, let's talk about Versailles in France. Mm-hmm. So Versailles is known as the Palace of Versailles, also known as the Chateau de Versailles. It was the main royal residence of France from 1682 until 1789, and it is located in Yvelines. I'm so sorry about my pronunciations. We're going to get there. And it is about 12 miles southwest of Paris, which is about a 30-minute train ride. Where did it all begin? You may remember I talked a little bit about Parisian history on episode 62 when I covered Ile de la Cité. In the episode, it's called What Your Sign. Essentially, from the 12th century onwards, Paris was by all rights the political, economic, religious, and cultural capital of France. And this is where the seat of government was. And this is where there was like a major royal residence there as well, the Louvre. So we're going to fast forward, however, from the 12th century to the 17th century. The seat of government is still in Paris, and the king would travel between Paris and his main royal residence in Saint-Germain-en-Laye, which was 19 miles from Paris, just to give you some like geographical context of what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And most of the information I'm going to tell you is from the Chateau de Versailles website and some other places as well, but mainly the like literal website of the location where you would like buy your tickets to go see, you know, the palace. The resource is amazing. They have so much information and so many articles, and I'm just like, I was actually kind of overwhelmed.
Right from the source.
Right from the source. I'm drinking right from the faucet. So before Versailles was a palace, it was essentially just like a bunch of trees, like a forest, and some beautiful meadows, and there was like good hunting there. Mm-hmm. And King Louis XIII had visited this area to hunt as a young adult before he was king. He really liked the area, and he found it ideal because it sat directly between his principal residence in Saint-Germain and Paris. It was like easier to kind of bop from Versailles to Paris and Versailles to Saint-Germain than to kind of travel between the, you know, Saint-Germain and Paris. Okay. In 1623, Louis XIII decided to build a small hunting lodge in Versailles. And by 1631, he was like, I love it here. Let's expand it. Let's build some more. So he expanded the complex, and he kind of had a bunch of different palaces. Not a bunch, like a couple palaces there. Estates, I should say.
Oh.
Not as big as what Versailles is today, but definitely bigger than like my apartment. You know what I mean? Even like the hunting lodge, it was a small country residence. And we're talking by royal standards, okay? A small country residence
is like 10 bedrooms.
At the very least. Because a king and a queen need like 10 apartments themselves for like, these are the king's rooms. There's like 10 rooms here. And then these are the queen's rooms. There's 10 rooms here. Plus the dining room and all the different sitting rooms and all the different rooms for their guests and blah, blah, blah. Just, I can't even fathom that much money. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so he begins the construction, and this construction is what lays the basis for what the palace becomes later on. And while he really loved Versailles and the hunting lodge and the estate, he rarely invited guests to stay. There were apartments for himself and the queen, but she never slept there because the king always arranged for transportation for her to either like go home to Saint-Germain or to go to Paris and stay at the Louvre. And at this time, the residents at Versailles were essentially just for the king to like go hunting or to like retreat from day-to-day life or to like hang out with his preferred mistress, who apparently was just platonic. They never had sex. Whatever.
There, you're throwing a lot at me. So he was just hanging out there alone. He like never had friends over. He never wanted his wife to stay over. He just had his platonic mistress.
His platonic mistress, who like, apparently he professed his love for her many times. And she was like, I am a woman of God. And they never banged. But apparently she and the queen were close friends, and they would often joke about the king being in love with the mistress. whatever. There was drama at Versailles. I just can't keep up.
People didn't get married because they loved each other then.
They
so
did
I feel
not.
Like, you know, she's like, fine, I'll just go back to my 10 apartments, have as many affairs as you want.
I mean, like, hello, just like take it easy. Put your feet up, right? Okay, so the palace as we know it, this opulent like world of fashion, mystery, intrigue, Marie Antoinette, the French Revolution, that didn't really come into existence until the reign of Louis XIV. Louis XIV is the son of Louis XIII, and Louis XIV always liked Versailles from the times he visited throughout his childhood. And at the death of his father, he decided to kind of expand upon the buildings that were there. In 1661 is when the first major works began in the palace. From then until the end of Louis XIV's life, the palace was continuously under construction. Some of the works completed at the command of Louis XIV were the forecourt in 1662, the pavilions of the Secretaries of State in 1671, the South Wing in 1681, the Grand Commune in 1684, the North Wing in 1689, and the Royal Chapel in 1710. He also built and expanded upon some of the most famous places at Versailles. These are probably some places that you've heard of or you've seen pictures of. The Orangery, for example. So the Orangery sits just beneath the palace. It's essentially a large greenhouse for storing fruit trees throughout the winter. This is what they would do. They would like have fruit trees inside so they could have oranges and apricots and pears and pomegranates throughout the winter. It must be nice to be royal. So this orangery was more than 492 feet long. It had 42-foot high ceilings, and it was surrounded by the famous 100-step staircase. The walls were 13 to 15 feet thick, and all of this was to maintain like a warm temperature so that the trees wouldn't die in winter. Mm-hmm. I guess that makes sense, but it's bonkers that they were allowed to do this. And then during the summer, the fruit trees would actually be moved outside into the surrounding gardens, and a lot of these trees remain today and are more than 200 years old.
And they still move them in and out?
They move them in and out. Apparently orangeries are like not uncommon. Okay. It must, like, this is all, like, this is unfathomable to me because I'm not that wealthy. I'm not wealthy at all. In fact,
Oh, you mean it's not that uncommon? I'm like, well, yeah, orange trees aren't uncommon. That's where oranges come from.
No, orangeries. Like the building
yeah.
itself, where you keep your fruit trees inside before moving them outside in the summer. Another thing that Louis XIV expanded upon was the Grand Canal. So beyond the gardens of Versailles, which are in itself just insanely beautiful and opulent, and just at the time they were filled with statues and just hedgerows and every plant imaginable. Apparently it was said that the gardens were so fragrant, filled with so many flowers, that people would get physically ill because they smelled so strongly. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so past the gardens, you would find the park, which covered approximately 1,976 acres. And inside the park is the Grand Canal, which took 11 years to complete and is over a mile long. So when I say a Grand Canal, I literally mean like a mile-long waterway in the park.
Mm-hmm. That's wild.
It's wild.
Rich people are crazy.
Right. And so Louis XIV would use the Grand Canal to sail all types of boats, such as rowboats and also gondolas. In 1674, the Republic of Venice sent the king 2 gondolas and 4 gondoliers. The gondoliers lived in a series of buildings at the end of the canal, which was referred to Little Venice. And during the summer, the canal played host to the king's fleet of vessels and naval displays. And then in the winter, when the canal was frozen over, they would use it for skating and sledding.
I want to watch a sitcom about the gondoliers that live at the end of the canal.
Right. Okay. Can like the BBC do like a Little Venice at Versailles miniseries? I would watch it. And then probably the most famous room in all of Versailles is the Hall of Mirrors. I feel like most people have either seen a photo of the Hall of Mirrors or heard about the Hall of Mirrors. It was originally just like an outdoor terrace that connected the king's apartments to the queen's apartments. But then they replaced this little terrace with the Hall of Mirrors. It is approximately 239 feet long, and it is a tribute to the political, economic, and artistic success of France. There are 30 painted compositions on the vaulted ceilings by Lebrun, and these depict the glorious history of Louis XIV during the first 18 years of his reign. There are 357 mirrors in 17 arches, and these arches sit across 17 beautiful floor-to-ceiling windows. And this demonstrates the French mastery of manufacturing, because at the time, the Venice Mirror Makers Guild was the only place in the world that could make beautiful mirrors. It was an extreme luxury. But Louis XIV was like, F that. I want mirrors here. And so he like bribed some of the Venetian mirror makers to like come to France and make mirrors. And that's how he got all these mirrors in the Hall of Mirrors. Like I said, massive luxury. Like if you've seen like old movies, like historical dramas, and you've seen people look into mirrors, or these like foggy, like patchy, like looking disgusting thing. That is not what's in the Hall of Mirrors. We're talking masterful mirrors here.
Pristine.
Pristine. And thanks to Louis XIV, Versailles transformed into an immense, extravagant complex surrounded by stylized French and English gardens, and every single detail was intended to glorify the king. Here is a quote from Bossen Schmidt, a Denmark-based writer at This is Versailles. Quote, "As King of France, he was the embodiment of France, and his palace was meant to display the wealth and power of his nation. Furthermore, it was vital to him to enhance France's status in Europe, not just by military feats, but in the arts as well. For instance, when the Hall of Mirrors was built, mirrors were usually imported from Italy at the great cost. Louis XIV wanted to show that France could produce mirrors just as fine as those produced in Italy, and consequently, all the mirrors in that hall were made on French soil." Very nice.
Major flex.
Flexing. And in probably one of the most important things to happen at Versailles, at least I think so, a not historian, but just like a general interest in this kind of shit. It was in 1682 when Louis XIV declared that Versailles was now the main residence of the French court and government. It might not seem like a big deal that the king decided to move the court and the seat of government to Versailles, like from Paris to Versailles, but it was pretty massive, and it had like a lot of implications. So the main reason he decided to move the court from Paris to Versailles was control. Louis XIV wanted to control government officials and the noble class. But why would moving them from one city to another mean that he could control them? Well, here's the thing. He required people of a certain rank, they had to spend like a certain amount of time at Versailles every single year. It was legally required, and you would get into a shit ton of trouble if you didn't live at Versailles. Not just you, but your entire family. Everyone had to live there, and you couldn't leave. So this was his way of like controlling and knowing where all the nobles and all the government officials were. And it basically prevented them from developing their own regional powers. And it helped him have like a firm grasp on this absolute monarchy idea. He thought he was the god on earth. And so that's kind of why he wanted to control all his little pawns in one place. And another means of control that Louis XIV enacted while moving the whole court to Versailles was an incredibly meticulous and strict court etiquette. And this is just weird. So under Louis XIV's court etiquette, the smallest details of life at court, including like personal hygiene, were dictated, regulated, and policed. So I'm going to go through a couple of them. And I think there's like hundreds of rules. I can't go through them all. I'm just going to pick out a couple, the ones that I thought were kind of weird. So first and foremost, knocking on doors was highly regulated. So tapping with your knuckles was faux pas. Instead, courtiers had to scratch on door frames with their fingernails. This was the only way to announce your presence in a room. And as a result, courtiers would just grow out one of their fingernails specifically to scratch on door frames, because it was considered like of the peasant class to make noise.
I can kind of see that. Well, sometimes knocking is scary. Maybe I'll do a little scratch. Imagine we start doing that at work. Like, can we come in?
We just grow one fingernail out really long. We should do it with and just like, pinky. Hello. So that's weird. And then, okay, so the royal wake-up calls and official bedtimes were extremely important and ritualized. They were called the lever, that was like the wake up, and the coucher, which is to go to sleep. And nobles received the privilege of getting to attend the king or queen as they woke up or went to bed. Privileges included handing the king his shirt, and that was reserved for the highest ranked gentleman in the room, or helping the king change his clothes for the day.
That's too intimate for, like, your coworkers.
And it was, like, every single day. And if for whatever reason, like, the king was in a bad mood and, like, lever and coucher were, like, off the menu, it was seen as an incredible slight to the noble class to, like, not have them in there and doing that. Like, have you seen the Marie Antoinette movie with Kirsten Dunst?
Mm-mm.
If anybody has seen that, like, the scenes where, like, Marie Antoinette wakes up and there's, like, 20 nobles standing there waiting to, like, help her get dressed, that literally happened.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest honor, apparently, was helping the king change, because you actually got to see his naked body.
Well, I guess that is
some people just love
definitely
that.
Close.
Some people just love
Intimate.
it. Okay, here's another one. Only important people got to sit down in the presence of royalty. So the king got an armchair, of course, as did the queen and any visiting monarchs. But courtiers were granted the privilege of sitting based on their rank. Princes and princesses of the royal bloodline were entitled to armless chairs, while duchesses could sit on stools, and everyone else had to stand.
Oh my God. I hate these people.
I hate them too. Also, the king was very specific about how he would greet people. He would entirely remove his hat for a prince of the royal blood. He would only lift his hat for a nobleman and only touch it for a gentleman.
Okay.
How do you know all these ranks? Like, there was like at least 6,000 people living at Versailles at any given time.
He had to have someone in his ear being like, "Psst, nobleman.
Touch your hat, my lord."
That could have been you.
I would have been a great hat reminder.
Yeah.
And this one is the weirdest to me. Well, they're all freaking weird, but this is weird. There was this ritual called the Grand Cuvee, which was essentially the ritual of the royal family eating together, and then all the nobles would stand around and watch them.
Oh. And these people are nobles, like, they're supposed to be high ranked themselves and they have to do this bullshit.
They got to do this bullshit because we're talking absolute monarchy here.
Mm-hmm.
Louis XIV thought he was God on earth, literally.
Yeah.
And he had the Pope. Yes, this was Catholic. He had the Pope at his back, being like, "Yes, Louis XIV, I agree with you here. Thank you." That's how the Pope sounded back in the day.
I believe that.
So yeah, and we can't talk about Versailles without talking about Louis XVI. Louis XVI was married to none other than Marie Antoinette. Mm-hmm. When he inherited the palace, he gifted his wife, Marie Antoinette, a place called Petit Trianon. If you had seen the Kirsten Dunst Marie Antoinette movie, you would know this place. Since you do not, I will give you some details. Essentially, this was a small estate on the grounds of Versailles. So this was like another big estate that was like on the grounds of this massive palace. Mm-hmm. And it was originally built for a previous king's mistress, but Petit Trianon became Marie Antoinette's private domain. She used it to escape from court formality. While she was at the palace, she kind of felt restricted and under like constant scrutiny, right? Mm-hmm. But while she was at Petit Trianon, no one was allowed to enter the property without consent from her. So essentially, the only people that were ever there at any given time were her inner circle. It was even rumored that the king himself could not enter without her consent. Mm-hmm. Also, Louis XVI was like very timid, so he wasn't about to like go busting down her door and be like, "I'm the king." Mm-hmm. Anyway, what I find weird about this is that this was the queen's, quote, rustic getaway, where she built a fake country village with cottages and streams and grottos and a mill wheel. She spent a lot of time here dressed as a peasant, romanticizing the idea of a simpler life. She would, quote unquote, raise goats and chickens, pretending to be a peasant.
I'm glad to know that people haven't changed, because I still feel like extremely privileged people or rich people like to pretend that they aren't.
They like to co-op poor culture.
Yeah.
That's what they like to do.
Can't go into that, but...
Marie Antoinette is an extreme example of that, okay? And we wonder why the French Revolution happened. Speaking of, it happened. The French Revolution, it happened shortly after this whole Marie Antoinette bullshit, right? I'm not getting into it. Essentially, the royal family was whisked away from Versailles in 1789. and then the revolution happened. During the revolution, the palace was maintained, essentially, though everything inside was disposed of, aside from what was called works of arts and sciences. So the arts were dispersed to like local museums, or they were stored away at the Louvre. All the furniture and furnishings that hadn't like found a home otherwise were sold off over the course of 2 years, 1793 and 1794. There are approximately 17,182 pieces on offer, and a majority of these were sold to Paris merchants or citizens. I'd be really interested to know like what happened to those furnishings and like furnitures, like if they're still around, if they've been returned to.
It's like the Fabergé eggs.
Exactly. Can we find all the missing pieces? Following the revolution, the palace was used for many purposes, such as an attraction with guided tours, a storehouse, a science museum, a library, a school, a theater. In 1919, after the devastating 4 years of World War I, the Allies had Germany sign the Treaty of Versailles in the Hall of Mirrors. And then in the 20th century, Versailles went through many bouts of restoration projects to return it to its former glory. And in 1979, UNESCO designated the palace and gardens a World Heritage Site. It is the second most visited monument in France, second only to the Louvre, and it is more popular than the Eiffel Tower.
I was going to say.
Yep. And more than 3 million people visit it annually. I'm going to end with some fun facts that I couldn't find a way to like build in otherwise. During the height of its usage, it was estimated that the annual cost of maintaining the palace was anywhere between 5 and 25% of the French government's income. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And Marie Antoinette was spending like a crazy amount of money. And like Marie Antoinette's story is a lot more complicated than let them eat cake. But she was a previous princess of Austria. She came from one of the most noble families ever, married into one of the most noble families, and lived in the lap of luxury. So yes, she was rich. And they spent a lot of money. Here's another fun fact. The king and queen usually ate their meals cold. Why, you ask? Because the kitchen was located so far from the dining hall that by the time the food arrived to their table, it had gone cold. That's how big the palace was.
Well, that's poor planning on their part. I guess money doesn't buy you common
warm
sense.
Food. It should buy you warm food, but in this case, it does not. The palace also, throughout its lifetime, had several menageries, or zoos, essentially, and they were just filled with exotic animals, like lions, tigers, bears, oh my, birds, everything you can imagine. It was like the modern-day precursor to the zoo. And probably the most interesting fact, and not something that I can really like get into in this episode, but I will share an article on this particular factoid or tidbit or like little slice of history, is the fact that Louis XIV is known as the King of Couture because of his practices while king at Versailles. And it's related to his strict court etiquette. So there's an incredible article on The Atlantic. It's called King of Couture, How Louis XIV Invented Fashion as We Know It by Kimberly Chrisman Campbell. So Louis XIV was all about luxury. He established furniture, textile, clothing, and jewelry industries, and they were all highly specialized and strictly regulated by professional guilds. And this ensured quality control and helped France compete against foreign imports. It really stimulated the economy, the way kind of Louis XIV like set up these industries, right? Nothing that could be made in France was allowed to be imported to France. And then, you know how we talked about his like strict court etiquette rules? Some of the strictest parts of that etiquette was like the garment and attire and fashion rules. Women's fashion was highly regulated. Men's fashion was highly regulated. And it was all at the whim of the king. So if the king's whims changed or his fashion sense changed, so did everybody else. Initially, Spain was like the fashion capital of the world. But then Louis XIV happened and he completely changed it. And it's because of Louis XIV that Paris is known as the fashion capital of the world now.
Interesting.
And Louis's involvement in like the fashion industry is essentially the reason why we have haute couture today. And I highly recommend you read this article. We'll share it in the description. It's a lot more in depth than what I just gave you. But anyway, all of this is made possible because of Versailles. That's it, and that's all. That's all I got.
Shout out to Versailles. Shout out to rich people.
Yeah. France, thank you for providing 2 great topics for our podcast.
Yes.
Much obliged.
A very French episode today.
Yes.
Well,
Oui, oui.
if you want to see, or well, I don't know. I have to pick out a poll for this week, and if you want to answer the poll, you should follow us on Twitter at the Good Eve Girls.
And if you're not interested in answering questions because you just feel like that's too restrictive, you can head over to our Instagram, The Good Evening Girls, and that's where we post really fun pictures from our episodes. And I feel like this week the pictures are going to be great. We've got mimes and one of the most insanely, like, ridiculously opulent palaces in the world.
You want to see a hall of mirrors? Come to our Instagram.
You want to see a sad clown mime? Come to our Instagram.
We got it all, baby. And then
We
if you
do.
want to follow us on TikTok, we're there at the Good Eve Girls. But until then,
Until next time, my friends, we'll see you then.
bye-bye.
Bye.